You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma Podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at citizensedmond, as well as go bank there, because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password, because I seem to forget it daily. So yeah, go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome. This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedoghouseokc.com and follow them on Instagram at thedoghouseokc. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Exciting episode for you today. There's a lot of cool things happening in Tulsa, but one of the coolest things, in my opinion, is the OKPOP Museum. It's right across the street from Cains. Fantastic location. I've had the fortunate opportunity to tour the building. I mean, it's going to be incredible when you guys see it. But today, we're going to hear a lot more about it, what's coming, the plans, all the stuff, with Executive Director, Mr. Jake KrumWiede. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, man. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we dive into OKPOP, like everyone knows, if they listen to this podcast, we like to tell the story of our guests and share some context and build some context around you, why you're in this position. And so what is your Oklahoma story?
I am a lifelong Oklahoma guy.
Yeah.
I like to say the story of my family, where my parents met, where I was born, where I grew up, is all because of one thing. My dad used to work at TG&Y stores, and so he met my mom in Coffeyville, Kansas. I was born in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and I grew up in Claremore, Oklahoma. And those were all just because of one thing, TG&Y stores that my dad managed. But lifelong Oklahoma guy. I grew up in Claremore. went to Rogers State University there in Claremore for my bachelor's degree, and then Stillwater for my master's.
Yeah, go Pokes.
That's right.
I never miss an opportunity to get that in there for all my Norman friends. Yeah, I love that. So, passion for museums and history at a young age?
Yeah, honestly, history has always been something that I've loved. Even from the time that I was a kid, one of my favorite memories was going to museums with my dad. I remember going to, the ones there in Claremore, the J.M. Davis Gun Museum and the Will Rogers Memorial Museum. I remember attending those with my dad. He would take me there on the weekends. But anything history related, I just always had a little bit of an interest. And then once I started getting into high school, I really started to fixate on history stuff. Not really intentionally, not that I was just a history guy, but it was just stuff I found fascinating. And that just kind of grew. And by the time I got to college, I needed to declare a major. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, honestly. But I knew I liked history, so I was like, well, there we go.
Yeah.
And just kind of fell into the rest.
That's the best way to live life, right? I say that. There's probably people out there with OCD that need to plan and need to, and some grow up and they know exactly what they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And maybe those people are more gifted than people like me and you, because I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of fall into things, and
exactly.
It's a fun way to live life.
Yeah. I knew at the time that I liked it. I knew I didn't want to choose a profession that I didn't like. So finding something that I liked was the main thing. And then just figuring out what the options were later.
Yeah.
Was, this is part of the process.
Yeah. Going into Rogers State and then obviously onto Oklahoma State, what are some of the best memories you have from college and stuff maybe you look back on and think, oh, this makes total sense where, why I am where I am today? Yeah.
I had a couple of really great professors, both at Rogers State and Oklahoma State that, took what was just an interest in history and really kind of helped me explore it into, what were options for careers. And, there was, I started doing some volunteering, kind of as a part of my time at Rogers State, at Fort Gibson, doing living history where I dressed up like a 1840s era soldier. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. That was kind of my first step into museums and historic sites, was that. And then with my internship, an official internship at Rogers State, I started working at the Will Rogers Memorial Museum, and I ended up working there for 13 years. And that's really where I really got my career started.
Oh, wow. So, that's quite a long time to be there then, 13 years.
Yeah.
And coming home, I guess, right? That's in your backyard, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I was, Claremore was my home for a long, long time, and it's always still will be my hometown. Mm-hmm. But it was cool to work there at such an iconic museum, and telling the story of such an iconic guy in American history, and certainly Oklahoma's history too. So.
Yeah. I think still people still don't know the story, sadly, right? Like it's such a great story and such a kind of impactful story, and a story of like not just Oklahoma, right? It's kind of touched a lot of things, but. Yeah, that's hard, and how do you get that story out? And 13 years, you probably did a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, I mean, with Will Rogers, he kind of has the unfortunate problem of, his peak was right before World War II, and after World War II, the entire world changed, and we started, we kind of forget about life before that almost, and especially when it comes to entertainment and pop culture. Really the golden age of Hollywood kind of is happening after the Second World War. And so, a lot of people don't have that lasting memories of Will Rogers, especially now. Mm-hmm. And so, that museum, we kind of were in a transition period for that museum's entire existence. We were trying to, share what was cool about Will Rogers. And, we kind of had to shift gears, in those years that I was there, to not just celebrating why he was, who he was, but like really educating people on who he was, because people didn't have that basic knowledge. And so it was a great museum, and I'm thrilled about the years that I spent there.
Yeah, I had, is it Jennifer?
Jennifer Holt?
Yeah.
Or
no, one
Jennifer
of his,
Rogers.
Yes.
Echeverry. Yeah.
She sent me, sent me an email, and the email came from the nut business email, which I think the nut business email is my husband's nuts.
Yeah. So,
and I was just like, I've just got an email from Jennifer at my husband's nuts. I don't think this is appropriate. And then I read it, and she's like, I'm related to Will Rogers.
Yeah.
It's like, and then she went on to explain the whole story about they're doing a movie. And, it was just after I interviewed, what's his name? Incredible Oklahoman from Tulsa. He's blind. Jim Stovall.
Jim Stovall.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just interviewed Mr. Stovall, and she listened to it and sent me a message after, and was just like, we're working with Jim as well on stuff and the movie, and she's like, next time I'm in town we'll connect, and
she's great. She's honestly one of my favorite people in the world. She's Will Rogers' great granddaughter. I think that's right. But yeah, she's has an almond farm where it's called My Husband's Nuts.
So awesome, and it's that on Instagram as well, because I looked it up, and it's at My Husband's Nuts on Instagram. Fantastic name for a nut business.
She really reminds me of Will Rogers, like that same sense of humor, just witty personality. She's great. One of my favorite people in the world.
He came out with some epic quotes. What's your favorite?
There's my absolute favorite Will Rogers quote is, it's not one of the popular ones that everyone knows, but it's, if you can't be good, be different. And that's been like kind of the story of my life. Like I've never been like the best in my academic class, but I always try to think creatively and think about different ways to solve problems. Yeah. And, so that just, I loved that quote. And that just, it meant a lot to me in my professional life and developing as a young professional and so like that one just perfectly encapsulates everything. Awesome. Love it.
Yeah, I love that. So 13 years at Will Rogers. When you're there, I mean, when you get there, it's your hometown, you're doing this job. Do you think that like I could be here for 40, 50 years until I retire?
Yeah, I really kind of felt that way when I started there. And I'll be honest, like in a way there's part of me that wishes I still was there. It was kind of an honor as a local kid to be able to be a part of that. But I'm still glad that I decided to at some point stretch my professional wings and try something else. Trying to work at a couple different museums and moving up into bigger challenges. And so I'm thrilled to be able to have cut my professional teeth there at the Will Rogers Memorial Museum. But there's a lot of growing that I had to do, and but it was a great time. I loved it.
So where, I guess that's transition then, where do you go after that?
So I started there at the Will Rogers Museum as an intern and left as the assistant director. Leaving the Will Rogers Memorial was tough. I mean, like I said, I'd been there for 13 years. But my next step was I got to be the executive director at a museum in Enid, called the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. Great museum, great team that's there. And Enid's a great community. It's just this little gym in kind of the rolling plains of Oklahoma. I love Enid. But yeah, I was there for a little over 4 years as the director of that institution during COVID, which was tough. But it was there was a lot of cool programming that we did there. And it was great. I really enjoyed my time there in Enid.
And then you get the phone call that says, "Hey, there's an opportunity. You want to come to Tulsa?"
That's pretty much
come halfway back home.
That's pretty much it. Right. I loved the vision and the idea of what OKPOP is, and when the opportunity came to take on the project, I had to just kind of stop for a minute and just kind of collect myself. I mean, I was honored to be given that opportunity, but it was exciting too, and all of the stories that Oklahoma has are incredible stories, absolutely incredible. Yeah. And what I really everything in my career that I've wanted to do, the reason, like the why behind everything, goes back to back to high school, where all of my friends, some of them stayed in Oklahoma, but a lot left. And, you know, young people at the time would always be saying the same thing. Oklahoma's boring. There's nothing interesting or cool about Oklahoma. And I couldn't disagree with them more. And all I've wanted to do with my career is show people why Oklahoma is awesome. And that's what I love about OKPOP. It is highlighting all of those stories in Oklahoma that we hope to surprise people with and be like, oh, wow, I didn't know they were from Oklahoma. I didn't know they did all these great things. But ultimately, just do that. Show people why Oklahoma is awesome.
Yeah. So when you get, I guess, the phone call that says, hey, there's an opportunity here, would you be interested? Did you know about OKPOP at this point? I'm sure in the museum community, you kind of figured that there was a lot of crossover and you know these people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So actually, I should mention the Will Rogers Memorial Museum, the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center, and OKPOP are all part of the Oklahoma Historical Society.
Great.
So, I had known about OKPOP for some time. And like I said, always kind of appreciated what they were doing. And being able to be a part of it is just really, really great.
Yeah. As much as you know, probably moving away from Enid, there's some great things in Enid. But moving back, a little bit closer to home and Tulsa and just the location of OKPOP, like right across the street from Cains. It couldn't be in a better spot. Yeah. You know, like you've got so much history and music and culture across the street right in front of you that you look at every day. Yeah. You know, and it's a beautiful new building. It's massive, right? You got, not only can you just host, have a museum, you can host events there, and it's, whenever it is up and running, like it's going to be amazing. What were your thoughts then when someone calls you and says, hey, like, and you get the job? Like, how are you an executive director of a place that's not even open, right? Like, what do it's a lot different compared to your previous roles.
It really is. No, it's very true. And this is one of the challenging parts about the OKPOP project is just, the way I see it, this museum, just to kind of give a little bit of the whole story.
We got time. We can give the whole story.
Okay, well, good.
What is OKPOP? Yeah.
Buckle up. Yeah. It really started out of an idea more than anything else. Not really like a collection or there were a couple of exhibits that were done at the Oklahoma History Center. One that was about Oklahomans and rock and roll, and another one that followed it about Oklahomans and movies. These two basic tenets of pop culture. And they were two of the biggest successes as far as like museum exhibits go there at the History Center. People loved it. And so my predecessor, Jeff Moore, and Dr. Bob Blackburn, the head of the agency, were, kind of thought, what, we might have something here. This is like the kernel of a great idea for a museum. And that little kernel started to grow, and eventually the idea for OKPOP coalesced into this museum in Tulsa. There were many different homes for where it was supposed to be, but like you said, where it ended up, right across the street from Cains Ballroom, we really look at Cains Ballroom itself as kind of like museum artifact number one. Yeah. It's like, it's a part of our exhibit. It's a part of our experience that we really do feel that. OKPOP is going to be a three-story museum. And on every floor, there are windows that you can easily see Cains Ballroom right across the street. So much musical history came out of Cains, and it's a part of so many different stories that we're telling within OKPOP. We felt like, that's a great place for us to tell these stories. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, so like I said, over time, it came to the idea of like, this needs to be a museum here in Tulsa. And, like that concept of what kind of museum we're building has evolved and changed over time. And we are in the process right now. So I bet you everyone's wondering, like, what is OKPOP? Is this a great museum? We're not open yet. So we are in the fundraising stage for phase 2. So the first phase was to build the building. The building exists right across the street from Cains Ballroom there. And the second phase of that project is to build out the exhibits, the visitors experience. And so we're raising funds for that, and we're chugging right along. We've got commitment from the state of Oklahoma for $18 million in matching funds, and the OKPOP Foundation, our great partners, are working to raise the rest of that. Mm-hmm. And things are going really, really well on that front. And we expect fairly soon to be able to wrap up this campaign and get started.
Yeah. So during this time, then you're kind of collecting stories, doing interviews, just kind of building an archive of all these things and reaching out. And, you know, once you start, it's kind of like opening the floodgates. Probably once the ball gets rolling, people start realizing what you're doing. Then people start reaching out to you and like, well, I have this. Yeah. Right. Like.
Yeah. So what's crazy, like I said, that this idea for a museum kind of started out of an idea, not a really existing collection.
Right.
Yeah, the Oklahoma Historical Society had some, but when you're talking about the length and breadth of like all of Oklahoma popular culture, that's a huge subject. That's a huge field of subject matter. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of collections that, you know, we needed to identify, acquire, et cetera. So, you know, I get asked all the time, well, okay, you're a museum that's not open. What are you guys doing all day? Our staff is working tirelessly around the clock to develop relationships with all of these Oklahoma creatives, and start to build these relationships, get these collection items, get their oral history interviews, mm-hmm. So we can actually do the job of building a good museum around these collections we're acquiring. So, you know, I like to use the example, I was at the Will Rogers Memorial for 13 years. Will Rogers was a guy who, he's been dead for nearly 90 years now. We had a relationship to maintain with really just one family, and that was the Rogers family. Really had just one collection that was the collection that focused on Will Rogers. We're focusing on hundreds, thousands of different people. Yeah. I would say the vast majority, 95% of which don't have any academic research ever been done on them. Yeah. So that's what our team is doing. We're trying to identify those stories that we need to tell, acquire the collections, do the academic and curatorial research on these individuals, and one of the primary storytelling methodologies that we're using, actually, we kind of have this idea, like, can you build a museum without having anything that you read, any panels that you read on the wall? Yeah. We want to be a very non-traditional kind of museum, right? Mm-hmm. Whether we do that or not is another question, but one of the primary storytelling methodologies is being able to have these artists tell their stories mm-hmm. On their own instead of us telling their story for them. Yeah. So we really look at it as a collaborative process of us working with the artist so they can share their history, mm-hmm. what inspired them about music or film or whatever, how they got to whatever point in their career. So, you know, using those relationships, we're collecting these oral history interviews. And so we have over 1,000 video interviews with Oklahoma creatives that aren't just in Oklahoma anymore, all over the country and beyond. And we're hoping to get a few hundred more before we actually open the doors. Yeah. So it's a unending process. I think it's easy just to look at an empty building and think, well, what are they doing in there? We'd love to tell you. There's so much cool stuff that we're uncovering. If only we could tell you, right? Yeah. So much cool stuff we're uncovering as we go.
I've done 620-something episodes of this podcast. Yeah. I can't imagine doing over 1,000 in such a short period of time that you've done, right? Like, is there any this is a tough question. I don't mean is there any that stand out, but is there any that people in Oklahoma are going to be like, I had no idea that person had a tie to Oklahoma, and their tie is so significant that that nobody has. Is there any that jump off like that? Because everyone's got a tie, right? And there's going to be people in there. You're like, of course, this person's in there because we know them. They're in the community. They stayed in Oklahoma. Yeah. But is there anyone else, though? A few people maybe you can name that you just like, we have this person sat down.
Yeah. So there's a handful of people that I would say. I mean, we're surprised every day by people, you know, we're the ones that are being the experts on this subject matter, right? But every day we're coming across people where we're like, oh, wow, I didn't know there was that connection. This is a shame on me sort of moment, but one of my literal favorite bands growing up in high school and college was this band called Calexico. And they've literally been my favorite band for the better part of 2 decades. More than that, geez.
Sorry to age you.
I got to sit down. But their drummer grew up in the Tulsa area. And, you know, in fact, one of our staff at OKPOP he is in a band, and his drummer is, I think, the nephew of John Convertino from Calexico. Yeah. So anyway, point being, like, we're every day kind of being surprised and surprised by people that have these Oklahoma ties. But, we've done some pretty big interviews recently. We just sat down with Kristen Chenoweth and interviewed her. That was a really great interview. But one that comes to mind that we haven't been able to sit down with yet, we're working on it though. Ron Howard. I mean,
oh, dude, he's top of my list to interview for Oklahoma.
100%.
I love him.
Yeah, and I mean, his family has such deep ties in Oklahoma. I mean, when he did the film Far and Away, it was based on to go back to my previous museum, the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. It was based on that land run for the Cherokee Outlet in 1893. His, I think, grandfather or his dad's grandfather made the run in 1893 there. So I mean, his family goes back to when Western Oklahoma was kind of forming. So yeah, a lot of these stories go back a long way. Some of them came to Oklahoma. Their parents were in the military, for example, and were stationed at different military bases. But everyone's got a little bit of a tie to Oklahoma, and like I said, Oklahoma has a way of impacting people, and I love being able to see that in the creative output of all these people too.
Yeah.
The Oklahoma influences.
You're looking at one right now.
Yeah.
I'm from the UK. I wouldn't be here without it, right? Like, I chose to stay because of how great Oklahoma was to me.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I have a podcast telling stories about the state. It's nuts,
fantastic.
Right? Like,
I love it.
I did a podcast earlier this morning, and the lady was like, I have imposter syndrome. I was like, you're talking to a guy who has a podcast about Oklahoma who's from Wales. Like, yes, I have imposter syndrome. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear those stories, right, of people who have come here, or because of either it's a military family, or they grew up here, or they moved away, or whatever it is. Like, their great grandmother moved, because of the Dust Bowl to California. Whatever the situation is, you get to tell, like, whatever it is, part of their Oklahoma story, right? Because probably some of these people who are, A-list or actors, right? Or people might know them from movies and have no idea that they're a tie to Oklahoma, and you're kind of narrowing in on whatever that tie was, right? Yeah. And if they remember, going to a specific gas station to get an ice cream, whatever it is, like, that's the cool stuff, isn't it? That and then how that influence is. I interviewed Seth Spillman from Cowboy Hall of Fame, now known as National Western Heritage Museum, and he spoke about why am I forgetting his name? Who's the guy from I remember from Tin Cup because I'm a golfer.
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner, yes. Yeah. Most people know him from Yellowstone. He said that he got to see Kevin Costner do his speech when he got accepted in his award there, and how impactful that was. But also he spoke about his ties to Oklahoma as well.
Okay.
And no one knew.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's just like, he talks about the influence and all this stuff, and in his speech, and Seth's like, I'm in the room and I have no idea that this guy has ties to Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's wild.
And you get to do that every single day.
Absolutely.
Which is so awesome for someone who loves Oklahoma history.
I know, it really is. And like I said, it's the stories that are fascinating to me, and it's the stories of these people and what they've done. And that's what, honestly, we want this museum to not be your typical museum. We want it to be something that inspires people. We want to show all of, every visitor that comes in, we want to show them these stories of these people, what they did, how they were able to create something cool or be a part of something cool. And really inspire the visitor that, they can see this. These people did it. They were from some small Oklahoma town. You can too. Really, really want to be inspiring people. We kind of joke inside OKPOP, we are the Oklahoma Museum of Popular Culture, but we're also kind of the museum about creativity too. It's that basic spark, that inspiration. That's what we want to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can use that as your North Star, right? Like we're not just a normal museum that's going to do the normal museum thing. Like if our exhibits are talking about creativity and how you can push the boundaries, then we should do that too, which also opens you up to whatever you want to do. Right. It doesn't keep you pigeonholed to a specific like avenue, which sadly most museums have to go down because that's how it's always been done. So we'll always do that. Whereas you get to be like, we don't want to have things to read. Let's not do that. Maybe, let's see if we can figure it out, which is super exciting. Yeah.
I really can't wait till we can get to the point where we can really show what the vision for OKPOP is, the exhibits, because we really want this museum to be cool and funky and interesting and not like your typical museum experience. We want it to be kind of be a reflection of, it's pop culture. It's cool and interesting, and we want the museum's exhibits to reflect that. So it's going to be cool. And we also say that, these stories are going to be continuing to grow, and there'll be new stories that go along the way. Obviously, that's what history is about. But pop culture has a way of being very in the moment, too. Yeah. So we say that the museum is about the history of yesterday, the history of today, and the history of the future. That's really what pop culture is to us, and it's going to continue to evolve over time.
Yeah, one of my favorite places to visit when I come to Tulsa is Church Studio. Love what Teresa's done over there.
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's incredible. We had one of the nights at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame induction ceremony was in Tulsa, I want to say a couple of years ago. The night before, we had our reception there for the Hall of Famers at Church Studio. And that was the first time I got to see it as an event space. And then I went back and toured the entire building, and I mean, what a spot. Yeah. Obviously, Tulsa Sound, Leon Russell, huge impact in pop culture. Yeah. His kind of the spider web of like impact that he's had across music reaches a very long way.
100%.
What's it like kind of using, and having Leon in your backyard or Church Studio in your backyard, and the relationship with Teresa and her absolute love and passion for music. Yeah. Right? Like there's no way she would have done that if she didn't love music.
Oh, absolutely.
Shout out to Teresa. You're doing awesome things. What's that like having that in your backyard and the relationship with them and just people in Tulsa Sound and the archives to be in the, you couldn't be in a better spot across the street from Cains. But
Teresa's one of my favorite people there in town. She's an awesome lady, but I kind of look at it as kind of like Cains Ballroom. They're these places, almost artifacts in their own right. These pieces of history where so much interesting stories came out of. It's a really awesome place, and what she's done for that place is incredible too. I just tip my hat to her. But the way I see it, when you look at the whole story of like you've got the Church Studio, Cains Ballroom, also like the Woody Guthrie Center, the Bob Dylan Center. You add OKPOP into the mix there, especially just like that's just music. Yeah. You've got this like cultural destination. You add into there all the other like pop culture related things that are right there, from the Outsiders House Museum just down the road to the Will Rogers Memorial Museum. Like there's so many things that are right there that all fit into this mix of what OKPOP is doing. We're kind of, what we like to say is it's not our job to tell the entire story of anybody's life, but to give you a little bit of a taste and to send you on the way to see, you want to learn more about Will Rogers, go see this museum, But Tulsa is really going to become this, especially with music, this cultural destination that, I mean, the more museums that build on that same concept, the better that relationship is, and the more that becomes, like I said, that ongoing destination.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, Steve Ripley's impact on saving a lot of Leon Russell archives?
Oh my gosh.
That was one of Scott's questions. Shout out Scott Petty for putting this together.
So the Steve and Charlene, his wife, have been big supporters and help to the project over the years. And I wish I had the chance to get to know Steve. I actually never met him before he passed. But, what they did, so Leon Russell, fascinating guy in and of himself. I think everyone knows that.
Oh, yeah.
But he recorded everything there at his studio. It's the interesting thing about Leon Russell and J.J. Cale, too. They were also kind of sound engineers to go along with being musicians. Leon recorded everything, whether that be film or audio. So any jam session he had at his studio, he recorded it. And so we literally have thousands of his tapes that we are in the process right now of digitizing all of these reels. But I mean, Leon, towards the end of his life, he wasn't really, he's like, whatever, they throw them away. I'm sick of dealing with them. And Steve was like, no, don't throw this away. Like, and thankfully, he worked with us and we were able to save all of those literally thousands of tapes. And when I say these tapes have literally, Beatles, like 3 of the 4 Beatles are on there. And it's just some incredible history that is on those reels that just so funny. Like Leon just was like, no, I don't really care.
To him, it's a normal day, right? But to the rest of the world, it's like these are musical icons.
Yeah, and he had the memories, but it's a way for future generations to relive those too.
It's just incredible.
They're really incredible. So, yeah, we're working on the process of digitizing all of those tapes right now, and it's like I said, a work of love.
Well, back to what you said earlier about at the Will Rogers, you're just focusing on Will Rogers. At OKPOP, Leon Russell is just one of the people that you're doing, right? And like I said, you've done thousands of interviews, and even Leon's stuff comes with, I think Scott said in the text, it was like 2 18-wheelers full of stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot, you talk about digitizing all those tapes, and that's a full, that could be, Teresa could do that. She's clearly made a business out of it, right? That's her one spot. But you're going to do this, and that's why you have a big building and 3 stories and a bunch of stuff. But it's busy. It's
a monumental task just those tapes alone. It's kind of almost overwhelming when you look at all of them. You're just like, oh my gosh, there's so many. But
yeah, we're going to discover on this next tape, right?
Yeah, right.
Did he do a good job of introducing the people so you know who it is?
Not exactly all the time. It was just kind of
hit record,
fly on the wall recorder sort of thing. But I mean, like you said though, like Leon Russell is one of a lot of people that stories that we want to tell. Yeah. And I mean, his collection is huge, and some of the stuff that's in the collection is, artifacts of his that we have are incredible too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's one of many. And, we have, that's, I think the funnest part right now is getting those collections and starting to acquire those collections and bring them into our, into OKPOP. Our team was, we just did what we call it like a collections trip where we, got in basically a U-Haul and filled it up with stuff going around the country. Yeah. Kind of all these relationships that we've been building, going and picking up these collections, and just a treasure trove of artifacts that we got just this last month. So, I mean, every day we're getting new things in. These pieces that can help us tell these stories of these awesome Oklahomans.
It's like the greatest episode of American Pickers.
Yeah.
Going around the country picking up some of these incredible things that have been, donated or whatever.
Oh my gosh! Just to tease one of the collections. So Archie Goodwin was a comic book artist and editor. He worked for Marvel for a lot of years. He was on the team that developed Iron Man. He created Luke Cage. Among many, many others. He did the first, the Star Wars comics that actually predated the films. So a lot of the artwork that's in those comics actually like predate anything that was shot. So it kind of has this interesting like Star Wars, but not quite Star Wars look to them. Anyway, we have been working with his family. He passed away a number of years ago. Working with his family, and we literally have over a ton, more than 2,000 pounds, 3 pallets worth of stuff that we got from the family. And it's just, I mean, everything from notes from George Lucas about, an idea for what this thing was supposed to look like, or his comic book collection, which has some incredible comics in. It's just absolutely incredible.
That is amazing.
Oh yeah, it's so cool.
The other thing Scott mentioned was the connection OKPOP has to George Harrison.
Yeah, so George Harrison played with Leon Russell on did a lot of different jam sessions with him, and so he is on some of those reels that we have there at OKPOP. And so, like I said, as we go through and start to digitize and start to identify what's on these reels, it just kind of blows us away, all the different connections that he had with people. But yeah, I mean, he's right there on those recordings of Leon Russell's.
Yeah, I mean, you've got such an icon like that, and I'm sure like the process is fun for you, right? Like coming into this now fairly recently, you're going back and you're looking at all the interviews and more that you will do, and like, it's exciting to reach out to the families, and I'm sure they appreciate it too, right? Like they haven't, some of these people might not have heard from anyone about a loved one or a long lost relative, right? Yeah. But you're like, hey, we're in Oklahoma. This person has a tie. Can you, we want to honor this person. Yeah. I can't think of many ways better to get an email or a phone call or whatever it is from a museum that says, we want to honor your granddad or your great granddad. Like, what do you have? Can you help us?
That's what's so cool about this process as we build these relationships with these families. Some of them, it's situations where this is maybe the first time they've gone through their dad's stuff after, since he passed, where it's kind of this cathartic way of reliving his life, reliving these people's lives. Mm-hmm. And so it's really, really, it's rewarding for us, but we love to hear the stories from these family members, them talking about and getting to know their fathers, their grandfathers in this new way that they may not have realized before, or kind of rediscover them. It's been a great process, and we love working with these families and finding ways that we can work together and tell those stories together.
Yeah, that's the discovery and the exciting part. And like the storyteller in me is nerding out over here, like not trying to make sure that, like, I mean, we could take this podcast down a rabbit hole about nerding out about storytelling that people listening would probably just not want to listen to, but I know enjoy it thoroughly. Yeah. But that's the exciting part of every day is different for you, right? Like every story is different, and you never know what, you might walk into that day, or you open your email and you're like, wow, this person just emailed me because they're, great grandmother or aunt or whatever has a tie to Oklahoma, and they were going through this stuff and found, and it's especially when it's art and pop culture and music and like the creative side of things. Like it's great, all right, if someone's in politics or whatever and they have a statue or an award or whatever you talk about, like, but the creative side, like music, art, poetry, the emotion that comes from that, and then when you see it or you listen to it, it takes you to that moment, doesn't it? It takes you to, like, what are they thinking? What's in the lyrics that they're going through right now? And then you do a little Google search and figure out what was going on in the world during that time, and you're like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Oh, 100%.
Like, as a historian, that, like, let's get the juices flowing too.
That's what's interesting about pop culture, is because it is such a authentic reflection of society, of what people care about. Yeah. What music is popular. It's really hard for people to love and listen to music that they don't like. So it's a good reflection of what society is fascinated with. And then the art itself is a great reflection of, the artist's experiences. I really like to look as, like, historians and musicians are very similar. We are observing society and telling stories about society, just in admittedly different ways. But we both kind of share that same idea of providing, like, this social commentary about these moments in time. And so, the music that people create and write, it's a reflection of Oklahoma. It's a story of us, really, when you look at it.
Yeah. What about... and I mentioned Scott again because you're a fellow to you, Oklahoma State alumni, and a proud resident of Stillwater, I believe. Is there any really cool stories that came out of people who went to Oklahoma State that stand out for you?
Well, obviously Garth Brooks is the big one.
Sure.
There's Garth Brooks. When I was a student at Oklahoma State, these guys weren't from Stillwater, but Turnpike Troubadours, I remember watching them play in Stillwater. And so anytime I think of Stillwater, I think of the Turnpike Troubadours, honestly. But Garth Brooks is the big one. He's one of our key stories. And, showing, his, how he grew up and showing his life. We like to say that we don't want to be, we're here in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. We don't want to be a Hall of Fame. We want to be able to show not just the moments where people are elevated and at that point of success, but what got them there. We really want to have those stories. And so, yeah, like being able to get artifacts that help tell Garth Brooks' story of his rise to be who he became.
Right.
That's what we're about. That's what we like doing.
Yeah, and I think there's such a value in that, right? There's a place for it all.
Yeah.
You know, yes, there's a place, like we're in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame recording today. There's a place to see this is the pinnacle of someone. This is what they've done. They've achieved this. It's Oklahoma's highest honor.
Yeah.
You know, they've done this. But sometimes you can't relate to that.
Right.
Right. Especially if it's someone who you've inducted posthumously or someone who's, you know, I don't know what the average age of the people inducted is, but generally speaking, they're old. Yeah. Older. Right.
Sure.
You know, and you have the exceptions like Russell Westbrook and KD and all that stuff.
Sure.
With what you're doing though, is you get to document the grind. Right, the good and the bad, the stories, talk about Garth Brooks playing on the street or playing in a bar to 4 people, right? You talk about Vince Gill or whoever the musicians are that have made it. Yeah. You know, like that's fun.
Oh, absolutely. And no, that's exactly it. I mean, we want to tell the story of how they got there and how they did it. What were their influences? What about Oklahoma influenced them? Yeah. You know, and I mean, we'll tell the stories of their big moments, you know, when they achieved greatness. But you know, it's the story of how they got there. That's that we really care about and what we want to focus on. So
and I don't want to say like the Oklahoma Hall of Fame does that as well. But it's nice when like, it sounds like you guys really dive into that how and what, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's, you know, it's fun to listen to those stories, but also, you know, the everyday person can listen to that and see those stories and be like, that reminds me of someone I know or myself, you know, like whether it's growing up, you know, with a tough childhood or having to move around a lot because you're in a military family, like whatever it is, right? You know, not being back to the quote that you said earlier, you know, not being, you know, if you're not good at something, be different. Yeah, like that's. Yeah. I'm gonna write that on my wall. Like it's just brilliant. Yeah. There's so many ways to do it.
Oh yeah, and you know that's what's cool about Oklahoma. You know, Oklahoma's history kind of plays into this. You have Oklahoma was kind of really a microcosm of the rest of the United States. You know, with obviously notable exceptions. You know, you don't want to discount the native experience at all, but like even still, a lot of the native tribes that are here came from somewhere else in the United States and were forcibly removed here. When a lot of the lands in what is now Western Oklahoma were opened, it was people coming from all over the country. And so Oklahoma really is this melting pot of so many different cultures, so many different ideas. And obviously that has an impact on its creative output. Like all these different ideas and musical influences over time play into this this idea of what OKPOP is going to be. All these people that were creative have these Oklahoma influences, and Oklahoma's influence is admittedly historically different than a lot of the other states in the nation.
Yeah. What are you excited about coming up? I mean, obviously you're in phase 2, which is it's never fun to fundraise, regardless of what you know, regardless of what you're fundraising for is brilliant. Fundraising is just not a fun task to do, especially when you're doing, you know, over 1,000 interviews with cool people about awesome stories. Like fundraising it's important. It needs to be done. But on the scale of on the scale of priorities, it's at the top. On the scale of fun things to do, it's probably not. So what fun things are you excited about that's coming up? Might not be work related, but on a personal level, you're excited about.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. I would say just keep an eye for some announcements coming fairly soon from OKPOP. Yeah. We'll be talking about some of those collections that we just recently received, with other announcements to come as well.
How soon are these announcements coming? Because I can delay this if you want to talk about it.
It will be within the next couple of months, I would say.
Okay, I can't delay it that much. Yeah. Sorry, people listening. You'll have to go follow OKPOP on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one other thing that we're really excited about. We'll announce it fairly soon too, but we're going to be doing a filmmakers camp at OKPOP. Okay. You know, one of the things since I've been there, programming at museums is one thing I've always loved. And even though we're not like an open functioning museum, I still have this like kind of this deep rooted feeling like a responsibility to serve the public and do things and share our stories through programming. So being able to do this like filmmakers camp where we can work with filmmakers and, you know, people that know how to, you know, do everything from editing to filming, and showing kids how the process works, helping people create.
Yeah.
We're really excited to do that.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. We mentioned Cains a lot. Any shows coming up that you are going to see across the street?
Oh man, I know that I think it's probably already sold out, but Robert Plant is gonna be playing there. There's another, I can't remember. I saw one just the other day where I'm like, oh shoot, I got to get tickets to that one. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, that's the cool thing. They're literally right across the street, so I could just, and now the commute to
commute's nothing.
to Cains is just walking across the street.
I had I went up there to see, who was I there to see last? Royal Blood played there from a band from the UK. And shout out to Rachel Cope, because Empire is literally right next door.
Yes.
And so that's probably a bad thing for you. You got Empire Pizza across the street all the time.
Joke.
Like I would eat there every single day if I was where I was.
I was just saying that became a real problem.
Shout out to Rachel. I did just buy tickets to the Red Clay Strays.
Oh, cool.
That's who's playing at Tulsa, playing at Cains, I think May 19th.
Awesome.
So I'm pumped to see them. They were sold out, so I had to pay extra on some terrible website to go, whatever. I'm going to go to that one.
I'm trying to think of who that was that I was going to I've got to go see them. Yeah, that's the thing though. They're a great place, a great venue, like a historic, iconic venue, but so many great stories that have come out of there.
With stuff like that, like meaning that like you come across stories that only you guys get to hear, because they're probably not great for the rest of the world to see, because maybe it makes someone look bad, or someone did something wrong, or it's pop culture, right? You look back, there's drugs flying everywhere back in these scenes. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, or stuff that back in the day was normal and today is you'd get canceled for and thrown in jail, which is for good reason probably. Are there stories though, or things that have in your kind of short time that have, you've been there, pop up and you're just like, I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this question that you will give me an answer of like things that you're allowed to share but you're not allowed to share. But just the stories that come up that you think I would never hear this or be able to share this if I wasn't in this job. Yeah,
there's some things that go along with the collection items themselves. Yeah. There are stories of artists, musicians from Oklahoma that struggled with addiction, and those stories kind of play out in the collection sometimes. Yeah. This one particular individual, Jesse Ed Davis, who was a fantastic native guitarist, he struggled with addiction, and he would get guitars, that would be given to him to play that he would oftentimes just sell for drug money. So honestly, it's a sad story, but so the guitars that they ended up giving him were the cheaper guitars. Yeah. As a way to kind of manage that. So that guitar is in our collection. One of those guitars is in our collection. So it's
you have to tell those truthful stories though, because it all adds context.
Yeah.
Right. It's history at the end of the day, and it also. You go back to what influences them. Yeah. And the music and the artwork is influenced by how they are in that time of life or whatever. Yeah. And if they get given a guitar that isn't as good as the one that they knew that they would be selling, then maybe the sound from that's different, and they produced a different sound. All this stuff ties in. People don't think of that. Right. But back to Cains, is it 100 years this year or next year?
Yeah,
it's this year. Right?
100 years is celebrating their centennial this year.
It's unbelievable, especially in Oklahoma, to have a place like that that's been going for 100 years.
Without a doubt.
I need to connect with them and do a show with them. That would be really cool.
Oh yeah.
What do you? Obviously, we talked a little bit about things that are coming up and phase 2, raising money. Excited to make some announcements of collaborations soon. As someone who grew up in Oklahoma, loves Oklahoma, and is big time into history, what are some of the bands or some of the artists that you're just like, man, I cannot wait for the world to see these collections that we have?
Yeah. Some not music related, but one of the collections we just got is gonna be really, really cool. There's so many I didn't know that moments when you're talking about all these Oklahoma pop culture related stories, but going the Muppets, there were going back to the early days of the Muppets, there with Jim Henson Studios. Obviously, there was Jim Henson, one of the major puppeteers, and Frank Oz, one of the originals. But another one was a guy named Jerry Nelson, who's from Oklahoma, and so we had developed a relationship with the Nelson family and his widow. But getting his collection was so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking like Muppets, like that's cool.
Yeah.
But a couple of the pieces that we got were his own personal collections. That's what is cool, is not just the things that you see on the screen, but those things of his that were personal. And all I can say is keep an eye on the news. Maybe you'll see something about those soon.
It's like the sketches, the work on the napkins, the stuff where you're just like doodling as a creative, right? That's the cool stuff.
It is.
Right?
It is.
And then you see something, you're like, oh, I recognize that. And this doodle turned into this incredible cartoon piece. Yeah. But it starts there.
Unfortunately, one of the pieces that we didn't get from Archie Goodwin's family, which I understand completely, these were very personal to his son. But, he would make, as he was packing his lunch for his kids, he would draw a little, something, a superhero on their like brown paper bags every day. And so he's got these collections of all these lunch bags with different like Spider-Man or something on it, just really, really cool stuff. Like, those are the neat things.
Right.
Yeah, the finished like comic book is cool, but like those things tell such a cool story.
Yeah, the finished product is always great, but it's the like we talked about, it's the process and like the little doodles and the stuff like that. That's awesome. Do you have any prized possessions of yourself that you're excited? You can, not the stuff that maybe on your travels you've been able to purchase for yourself, not for the museum?
No, not really. It's funny. We were just talking about this at the museum just today. We have an ethical obligation to not collect within our field, really. Yeah. There's actually some details on how that actually works, but it's not something that I do. And it's funny, museum people, the more I get to know them, just aren't quite as big a collectors as you would think.
Because it's work.
It kind of is.
It makes sense. Yeah.
But I mean, I think the funny tie between museums and like the real world is collecting things. Museums collect things, people collect things. Yeah. Admittedly, I do collect stuff, usually not related to our field, but baseball cards. I collect baseball cards. I dreamed of being a baseball player when I was a kid. But those are the things that I collect. Not really within the realm of pop culture, really, but,
on a personal level, baseball cards.
Yeah.
Finishing up, what, let's see what, I think we're done with Scott's question. Actually, no, Scott asked a question about Dick Tracy's watch.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. Okay. So Dick Tracy was a comic strip that was created by an Oklahoman from Pawnee, Oklahoma, Chester Gould. And so what we do at OKPOP, everything that we do, like we try to tie it to a story somehow. We're working, as we start to develop the exhibits, we have some basic ideas of what we want our exhibits to do, what we want as we start to put together the vision for these exhibits. One of the things that we're working with is what we call the Pop Watch. So it's basically going to be like the idea anyway is going to be like this kind of like an RFID sort of thing, or like maybe like an Apple Watch kind of thing where you check it out when you come to the front desk and buy your ticket, and use that watch to interact with a lot of things in the exhibits. It activates exhibit spaces. You create things with it. You have an account that you create, and it saves to that account. Kind of a cool idea in concept, and we're still working with how to do that. But it's all based on the idea of Dick Tracy's like two-way watch communicator thing. Yeah. And we're working with the OKPOP Foundation, and they have a little bit of a budget for us to acquire things. And one of the things we were able to acquire recently was Dick Tracy's watch from the film, the 1990 film, that Warren Beatty film. So we're going to have Dick Tracy's watch there on exhibit at OKPOP.
So cool.
And it is kind of one of those cornerstone like pieces just because we're using that particular story as a way to create this thing that the visitors will use in the experience. So it's a cool piece. Yeah. It's going to be fun.
Finishing up, can you give us a explanation of sort of what is on each floor, the plan? Obviously, I've been there, so I know that like there's a stage on the first floor and a store, but like, you know, and a great double doors to be able to get vehicles in, which I'm a car person, so I love that. Cool. Yeah. But yeah, give us a little kind of floor by floor, kind of, for people who've never been there. Yeah,
so OKPOP is 60,000 square feet, which is going to be split up onto 3 different floors. 60,000 square feet is a lot of square footage, but when you're starting to talk about all of Oklahoma pop culture, it's also inadequate.
It could be 1 million square feet.
Yeah. So we have it split up into the first floor we call the Crossroads of Creativity. It's kind of explores, it's a way to be like an introduction to the rest of the experience. It's what greets the visitor as they come in the building. That's where the pop shop, our gift shop is going to be. And temporary exhibit space, things like that. And that temporary exhibit space is kind of going to be a way for us to tell some of the stories. Because like really, pop culture is such a broad umbrella of stuff. There's going to be things we can't exactly cover in the permanent exhibit gallery. So we'll be able to do that on that first floor a little bit. But then the ticket that you're buying is going to be for that second and third floor. The third floor is going to be entirely focused on music. The second floor is basically everything else. The second floor is what we call imagined worlds. So it's going to be these immersive like sub galleries that are going to be in this space that are kind of genre specific. So you'll have your Western section, you'll have your comedy section. And in those spaces, you can tell all of these different stories about Oklahomans that have done things in these basic buckets. Yeah. But at the same time, you're creating these really cool immersive spaces where you can learn in a fun way, and kind of be surprised by, oh my gosh, I didn't know they were from Oklahoma. Yeah. So that's kind of the vision. And then moving up to the third floor, like I said, it's focused just solely on music. We call it the musician's journey. And unlike the second floor where we have it kind of subdivided into genre, we really feel that with music, people are very tribal. They like the music they like. So we don't exactly want to have it organized exactly the same as the second floor. But rather focus on that creative process, the journey of every musician that is kind of this connective tissue that every musician can relate to, from what was that moment that you were inspired by music? When did you fall in love with music? And then all the way through that creative process till they're at the end where they've made it and they're on stage, doing what we've come to know all these iconic Oklahomans to have done. So that's kind of the basic vision of what the exhibits will be. But like I said, at the end, we want all of these stories and we want people to have fun and enjoy their experience there. But inspiration, that's what we want to do. We want to inspire people.
Love it. Mate, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for sharing some stories. We'll definitely, keep in touch, and excited to continue sharing. And as the announcements come out, people listening can go to the website and social medias. I'll put the links in the description and keep checking that out. And it's exciting. Do you have a specific kind of goal to be, hey, we're going to be open 2020 whatever, or
not exactly? So
we obviously have a goal to raise a certain amount of money.
Yeah, we're focusing on getting that funding secured. Okay. And I do know that we fully expect the build out, everything from design to opening, will be probably like 18 months to 24 months. So it'll be
2026.
Once we've secured that funding, it'll be about 2 years. Okay. I'm not going to make any, draw a line in the sand and say this is when it's going to be.
Yeah.
But once we get that funding secured, which, like I said, I think will be fairly soon, we'll be able to hit go.
Brilliant.
And move on.
Well, good, man. Appreciate you coming in. Glad sharing some stories for people listening. Like I said, I'll put the website and links in the description. And check it out. It's a great spot. And if you're listening and you have someone who's in your family that's probably done something cool and they haven't reached out to OKPOP, you should probably do that. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln.
This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at citizensedmond, as well as go bank there, because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password, because I seem to forget it daily. Go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome.
This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.